Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Mega Man Powered Up. In the last part, we went through the old style mode in a bit of a longer part. After the part beforehand was nothing but extras, and thus 2 parts later we're finally back to the main storyline for Endgame. Notable, for those who watched the last part after I said in case you guys didn't want to get spoiled on the Wily bosses, although it's Mega Man 1, this particular remake's 13 years old almost, while the original game is well over 30 at this point. Not much for you to spoil there, but in case you didn't see that part, one thing I should mention right off the bat is that the Wily Castle works a bit like Mega Man 7 and 8, in that you go back to the level select between stages in the case of reasons. There's not much of a purpose to it in Powered Up compared to 7 and 8, which had shops. The only reason I see for it existing in Powered Up is because of the difficulty select system, so you could just replay each individual stage instead of having to go back to the entire castle to beat them on hard mode or easy mode, should the case be. The Wily Castle, Wily 1 is short. Shorter even than the original version, I think, but it's a lot more lethal. There's a lot more actual hazards in your pathway, rather than just a lot of spike spam in the latter third, or say the big eyes in the first third. I also have a good amount of the set pieces from the original one still in this one. This is one of the lesser changed stages in the game, but it's a thing. But we're almost already at the boss fight, and unlike Mega Man 1, this thing's weakness has changed. For this fight, you're not going to want to get the Thunder Beam out like your instincts might tell you. You want to get out the Firestorm.
Warning!
This is a first? A robot made for combat? Well, you're gonna have to get out of my way.
Yellow Devil is a lot easier in Powered Up because not only do you have a lot more telegraphing for his pieces moving due to the sound effect they added, but they also in general just move slower, though they still hurt like nothing else as you just saw. The thing is about this fight though, because of the lower speed and the longer animations, this fight takes forever. Notable changes aside from his weakness though is that this is easily one of the bosses that has the most changes depending on difficulty. On easy mode, he stays on the right side and never goes into this little ball formation attack. He stays on the right and just fires that one projectile out of his eyeball. On normal mode, we have this pattern and the single shot. On hard mode, he has an entirely different reformation pattern, and he also gets rid of his one single ball laser attack for 2 varieties of a laser. One starts high, where you want to get basically right next to him to avoid it, and the other starts low, and to dodge that, you want to go to the opposite wall and jump at the last minute. Think of, it immediately reminds me of Omega's claw beam attack from the end of 03, yes, where you're supposed to dash under that. Now, the Yellow Devil actually has some of the more entertaining conversations with some of the other Robot Masters. My favorite, as I think I mentioned a part or 2 ago at this point, is when you talk with him with Cutman. Cutman gets uber confused about what's going on and just starts imitating him like, Boo-boo? It's hilarious. There's a lot of charm in the dialogue and personalities in this game. Also, the Yellow Devil in this particular game is voiced by Gerald Matthews, who I believe was also Sigma in Maverick Hunter X, as well as Flame Mammoth. And I think Wild Django in that weird Dragoon fight from the final chapter of Command Mission. Again, as with the rest of the people who were with this voice acting group, we're hired by Capcom fairly often for Mega Man games in the early 2000s. I will say that this is probably the easiest Yellow Devil in the series, especially on easy mode for obvious reasons. But actually, if it's not the easiest, it's probably tied for the easiest with the one from the start of Mega Man and Base, especially as Base. The problem with it is that just takes forever. Like, that's one thing I'll give the original games Yellow Devil. It was hard if you didn't use the pause trick, but it was over fairly quickly due to how fast its pieces moved. This one, not so much. I like the remix of the boss theme, though. Not gonna lie though, I love the kind of gooey appearance and texture they gave it with that. I think that's technically what's implied to be the thing with it in the other games, but it just never looked gooey due to the graphics at the time. And like I mentioned earlier, you get to go to level select between stages, but I'm just cutting it out. And you might be wondering, Kyle, why did you skip a stage? This is Wily 3. No, it's not. In Megaman Powered Up, they actually reordered the stages so that what was Wily 3 in Megaman 1 is now Wily 2. So they don't have to split up the boss rush at all like they did in the original game. And this is probably one of the least changed stages in terms of pure level design, but they do place a couple of things in this actual tunnel now. There's these things, a bunch of guts blocks littered throughout the latter half of it, metars, I think the bonsai bell looking things are still in here. They put a lot more in this actual portion of the level to make it, you know, actually level. On hard mode, this stage gets wild due to how fast these things move though. Time slow could be useful, but given that you're still pushed by the current the same amount no matter what, it's not the most useful. Admittedly though, just gunning to the right through everything is a very valid strategy here just due to how many things there are to go through. And be careful with the bonsai bill looking things because their explosion effect lingers and will hurt you. I also think this game has a fairly high extra life drop rate compared to some of the other Mega Man games. At least it feels like that with my life this playthrough. Especially compared to Mega Man 1 where I can barely recall extra lives dropping, if ever. It's extraordinarily rare.
Warning! Intruders bad. Eliminate intruders. Intruders bad. Eliminate intruders.
Please, let me pass.
Negative. Must eliminate. Eliminate. Eliminate.
The CWU-01P has actually seen a dramatic difficulty increase, as while the general idea is still there, it moves around in a circle, and then attacks you, and then will go off screen, and there's one for basically each fifth of the health bar. They have changed the guts blocks up to fall after the laser hits the ceiling, which means you technically can hit them with a weakness more often, yes. But their laser is very hard to dodge, especially later on when it increases in speed after certain amounts of CWUs. The lasers change a bit depending on the difficulty. On normal mode, they go to about 2/3 of the screen length. On hard, they go all the way across, basically. And that makes it very hard to not get hit. And these things in particular get really high in speed on the higher difficulties. So overall, easily the most buffed boss probably in the game. On hard mode especially, they're just annoying. I forget exactly how they are on easy mode. I want to say they're closer to their incarnation in Mega Man 1, where they go fairly slowly and such. Oh, another addition! On hard mode, they regenerate their bubbles if they go off screen, so be careful with that. Either way, Wily 3 has been repurposed to now be the entirety of the boss rush, instead of splitting up between Wily 2 and 4 like it was in the original game. And an important thing to note about this boss rush is that no matter what difficulty you're playing on, it's one of them harder in the series because you have to go through all 8 bosses without any energy restoration. You do get checkpoints after every single one that you defeat, but your life stays at what it is until you die, basically. Thankfully, they put an extra life here, so they do have some ways around it, but this can be a painful boss rush, especially on hard mode, where you lose out on very precious invincibility frames and stun frames on the bosses. Also a notable thing, if you enter the boss rush as any of the main 8 Robot Masters, you'll fight Dark Mega in the place of whatever capsule that Robot Master would have been in, whereas the boss of this stage, I'll talk about that when we get to it. Either way, it's that time again. Hit the music. God, Super Mario RPG soundtrack is so good. And as you can see, I got my ass kicked heavily by this boss rush. Yeah, it's not an easy one at all, really. But they're at least kind enough to give you some amount of recharge after the boss rush, namely a large weapon capsule here, and a large life capsule about 2 or 3 screens from here. So they at least keep it somewhat nice to you. Kind of wish I was able to hold on to that life energy, but Wily 3 is probably the hardest stage overall in the game, just accounts for the pure amount of damage you can take. Barring maybe Oil Man stage, depending on how lucky you are there. Now, something you really need to keep an eye out for, as you'll see in a moment, you might see right behind the score, there's a spike. I didn't see that. Yeah. And notice how I had 0 lives? That was a game over. I had to go through the entire boss rush again. And I should mention, that boss rush was long. Cutting out deaths in it, it took about 15 minutes, and I sped it up around 1800% or something to get to around 30 seconds. No, around 20 seconds, actually. But either way, really annoying, really sad moment for me. And here we actually see some semblances of the old Wily 2, kind of rare in the stage, admittedly. But now it's time for a very familiar boss fight. And I mean that more than just it being a remake. It looks quite familiar.
On the scene.
Warning!
Hey, Blue Bomber. Just a little unfair to steal other robots' arms, don't you think? A clone of me? How far will Dr. Wily go? But I guess being a copy of you would make me the biggest cheat of them all, right?
The copy robot depends on the difficulty. The fight against it depends on the difficulty. On easy mode, I think it just tends to stay with uncharged shots and a few weapons, but on normal mode, it just goes through the pellet shots, and I believe it can use any weapon you can, but it doesn't switch the weapon immediately like when you do, like it did in the original game. On hard mode, its pattern changes entirely to just be spamming charge shots. Thankfully, it's easy to know what's about to fire them because of the way the charge shot sounds. When you're playing as other characters, they mimic them, including Roll and Proto. Actually, I think Proto Man might fight Megaman. Now that I think about it, I forget, it's been forever. But the Roll conversation's interesting because the copy robot Roll almost seems to imply Rolls has feelings for Rock, which, yeah, incest, great. No, I think it's just the robot trying to take things out of control and confuse her or some shit like that. When you're fighting the other Robot Masters incarnations, though, it can be kind of annoying, particularly with Robot Masters like Oil Man or, need I even mention Guts Man's own ability with how big that would get. But on the whole, it's doable, but it can be very, very grating. Wily 4 is one of the more similar stages in the game, at least in the early section. Although, actually, no, I think when it goes for more or less the same beats, but they get a lot harder with it. And the later section in particular, you might recall when I've talked about some of the kind of iffy platforming in the game with how precise you have to be, I've mentioned one jump that's just outright demonic. This is the stage that has that jump. And it's coming up here in the Guts platform section. It's not at all a problem on easy mode because they place the easy mode platforms over it. But on normal and hard mode, one of the gaps in the Gutsman platforms is ridiculously long. Here it is, coming up right here. Doing this without using time slow to stall yourself falling is... I think it might actually be pixel perfect. It is hard, I don't like it, always use that. And you might notice there's no Yosaichi. I'm guessing just due to how the final boss works or whatever, they decided not to put one in there. And admittedly, I'm kind of glad about that, given the fact there's better checkpointing and design coming up here, but it just feels naked without it. It's there in old style, so the item's in the programming, so... Either way, it's time to finish this off with Dr. Wily.
Warning!
If only I programmed you differently back then, it would have been genius! It's the only mistake I've made in my life!
really angry, Dr. Wily. Using innocent robots for your evil plans? I won't forgive you for this!
What? Why, you insolent fool! I will crush you with a loud, loud crunch! Behold, my latest creation, the ultimate combat robot, Wily Machine number 1!
Wily Machine 1 Form 1 depends on your difficulty. On easy mode, it just fires pellets while moving left and right, and the fight will end with you defeating it. It's weak against Firestorm, I believe. However, on normal and above, the fight changes entirely. Not only does it gain a second phase, but it gains a gimmick. The top of Wily's UFO lights up several colors, one representing each Robot Master. And the weakness at any point in time is what that Robot Master's weakness was. For instance, right now, it's Time Man, which means it's weak against Thunderbeam. Whenever he absorbs a Robot Master's power, or just using it rather, he uses their weapon as well. For instance, rolling, counter, Thunderbeam, so on and so forth. Notable due to how Super Arm works, when it glows white, that's Cutman, use the Mega Buster.
You stubborn fool! This time I'll finish you for good! Curses! Useless piece of junk! Wait a second! It's alive again! I'm a genius!
Form 2 looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? However, the gimmick is the exact same. Notable though, this phase gains 2 more attacks if you're playing as any of the Megaman variations. It has the old spinning shot attack, rarely, and it has this weird little spike attack where it'll grow legs and try to stab you with them. It's pretty rare though, and I think it might be hard mode explosive now that I think about it. Notable, you can still damage Wily at any point with just the Mega Buster if you want to go Buster only. It's just that his weakness changes from moment to moment. That's why you can still beat him with any of the other playable characters, because their attack's basically their Mega Buster. They'll just do less damage unless it's the weakness. Also, similarly to when it glows white for Cutman, when it glows orange, it's Gutsman, and Time Slow does nothing against him. So that's 2 phases you have to use your Mega Buster for, basically no matter what, to get some good damage in. I think on hard mode, he also moves left to right a bit more, so that's the thing to look out for. But on the whole, not a easy Wily fight, because he can still do some damage, but definitely one of the easiest ones.
Why, you... this calls for a temporary retreat! Whoa! Wait a minute! I promised to be good! I'm a changed man! I said I promised! Please don't hurt me! Alright!
And then they kept on fighting for over 20 years. As I mentioned earlier, though, if you're playing on easy mode, the fight ends after the first phase and Wily escapes in his UFO. Thanks to the heroic actions of Megaman, peace has once again been restored. Even the nefarious Dr. Wily seems to have had a change of heart, and is now ready to work for a peaceful tomorrow, or so it seems. Oh, you have no idea how much you're still in for, Megaman. Either way, that's Megaman powered up in full. Yeah, I didn't play every difficulty of every stage with every character, but you need to realize that's a lot of stuff. In fact, Megaman powered up is a very content-filled game. Between each character having 13 stages and 3 playthroughs for each difficulty, that's 39 stages per character, which between the 13 playable characters with all 4 versions of Mega Man, the 8 Robot Masters, and the 2 DLC, the sort of DLC characters and such, that comes up to over 500 playthroughs of a stage. It is ridiculous between that, the challenge mode, old style, and the construction tool. There is a lot to do here. And between the fact that they added a lot more characters to the Robot Masters, individual stage designs and such for every stage, I can say for a fact this is a much better remake than Maverick Hunter X, which barring the Sigma stages and Vile, was more or less just a remaster. However, they're on opposite sides of another spectrum, because I think Mega Man Maverick Hunter X, when you get down to it, and it's 2 playthroughs, works just right as a platforming game in terms of a content amount to my tastes, at least, because having to do 507 stage playthroughs, that's a bit much. Not only to mention the hours you can spend in challenge mode, even failing, the hours in construction. There is a lot to do here, and dare I say at times it might be too much for some people. Overall, it's still a great game. Sadly, it was only ever made for the PSP, but I can say for a fact, if you're a Mega Man fan, Mega Man Powered Up / Rockman, which is its Japanese title, by the way, is extraordinarily worth your time. But with that, I'm going to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Take care. And I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.